Welcome, my friend. You found your way to a quiet place tonight. There's nothing you need to do, nothing you need to fix, nowhere you need to go. Just let the day slowly fade behind you. You can listen or simply let the sound rest in the background. Either way is perfectly fine. When you're ready, we'll begin a gentle story meant for calm, for comfort, and for overthinking minds ready to rest. There are nights when the world feels just a touch quieter than usual. Not silent, not empty, simply peaceful in a way that feels rare and familiar all at once. On nights like this, even the air seems to move more gently, drifting through the dark like soft wool pulled slowly through steady hands. Somewhere beyond the busy hum of the day, beyond the lists and thoughts and worries that spin through the mind, there is a small lane that curves toward a hill, and on that hill stands a modest stone house. It isn't grand, it doesn't shine, it doesn't ask to be noticed, but inside, something warm lives. A faint glow presses softly against the windows, as if a candle has been burning since long before evening arrived. The glass is slightly fogged, carrying traces of past winters and quiet conversations, and when the breeze brushes by, it rattles the frame with a hushed, friendly sound. Not a startling rattle, more like a familiar knocking, the kind that tells you you're safe inside. This is the storyteller's house, and somewhere just past the threshold, behind a door that opens with the slow sigh of old hinges, there is a fireplace room that becomes warmer the longer you stay. The room doesn't overwhelm the senses. Instead, it welcomes gradually. A woven rug rests across the wooden floor, its edges gently curled from years of footsteps and long evenings. Shelves line the walls, not organized precisely, but lovingly, filled with small collections of carved figurines, weathered journals, and pottery cups that each hold faint stories of their own. The fire, resting inside a stone hearth, burns in an unhurried rhythm. The flames don't leap, they sway, they whisper. They rise just enough to paint the room in amber tones and send shadows sliding comfortably along the ceiling. You notice the soft ticking of a clock, slow and reassuring. It doesn't rush the night. It doesn't demand attention. It simply marks each moment as something gentle, something allowed to exist exactly as it is. And in the deep comfort of that space, thoughts begin to soften. They loosen, as though the knotted strings of the day have finally found room to relax. The worries that once sat forward in your mind drift just a little further back, replaced by a calm awareness of warmth and breath and stillness. Near the fire sits a broad chair cushioned with worn fabric that has shaped itself to countless evenings. A blanket hangs over the arm, inviting but never insisting. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and dried herbs, a scent that carries both memory and ease. Soon, the old storyteller will settle here. He will open a journal that looks as though it has lived a lifetime already. And in the hush of the night, as the fire murmurs and the clock continues its patient ticking, he will speak softly, not to excite the mind, but to soothe it. His stories are not meant to thrill, they are meant to comfort, like a warm cup held between steady hands. Tonight, if you'd like, you are welcome to sit near the fire, to let your breath slow, to simply listen, and to let the gentle quiet wrap around you, like a peaceful evening that never needs to hurry anywhere at all. The first time you step fully into the fireplace room, the floor gives a slow, familiar creak beneath your weight, not as a warning, but as a greeting. As though the house itself has noticed your presence and is gently acknowledging it. The air inside feels warmer than you expected. It isn't just the kind of warmth that comes from burning wood, though the fire glows steadily in the hearth. It is the deeper kind, the warmth that seems to gather from every memory, every story told aloud, every quiet evening spent in reflection. It's the warmth of a place that has been lived in lovingly, where silence isn't empty and time isn't something to chase. You pause for a moment near the doorway. There is something soothing about standing still here, watching the way the fire moves. The flames curl around the split logs slowly, leaning left and right, as if they were listening, responding, humming their own small melody. Sparks rise occasionally, drifting upward before fading into nothing, disappearing gently, not dramatically. It feels comforting to observe something so calm. The old storyteller sits near the fire already, in that broad cushioned chair that looks as though it has shaped itself around him through the years. His posture isn't rigid. He rests in an easy, unforced way, hands folded lightly on the cover of a well-worn leather journal that lies across his lap. You notice the journal first. Its cover is faded at the edges, softened by time, as if it has been opened and closed thousands of times. The corners bear tiny scratches, like delicate handwriting etched into the leather by life itself. When the storyteller runs his fingers lightly across it, almost absent-mindedly, there's tenderness in the gesture, not unlike the way someone touches an object filled with irreplaceable memories. He glances toward you, not sharply, not with surprise, but with the patient acknowledgement of someone who already knew you were coming. His eyes have the kind of kindness that comes from years of listening more than speaking. And when he smiles, it's small and reassuring. "Come in," he says softly, though more as a gentle invitation than instruction. His voice matches the room quiet, steady, familiar, the kind of voice you could follow without effort, the kind you could fall asleep to without missing anything important. Because what matters isn't the destination of the story, it's the comfort of resting with it. There is a chair opposite him, not identical, but equally shaped by time. Its cushion dips slightly in the center, promising softness. Beside it sits a small table with a ceramic mug resting on top, steam curling upward in slow ribbons. There's a faint scent of cinnamon and honey in the air. You move to the chair and settle carefully into it. The fabric welcomes your weight. Every tense muscle begins to ease just a fraction. You feel yourself sinking, not downward, but inward, toward a quieter part of your thoughts that you may not often visit. Here, thoughts don't have to run. They don't have to keep pace with anything. They can simply drift. The storyteller adjusts the blanket over his knees. "You've had a long day," he says gently, not as a guess, but as though it is something plain and understandable. Most people who find this room have, and somehow, without explaining why, that simple acknowledgement softens something inside you. You don't need to recount what the day has held. You don't have to justify the tiredness or the overthinking or the quiet worries that sometimes cling to the edges of your mind. In this room, your feelings are not problems. They are simply things that exist, gently accepted and slowly unwinding. The room continues to breathe. The clock on the wall ticks steadily, each sound spaced evenly, each beat carrying the same calm patience. A small crack in the window pane catches a sliver of moonlight and bends it, casting a thin, pale line across the rug. Shadows drift across the bookshelves as the flames shift. The world outside feels far away, not shut out, but softened by distance. The storyteller opens the journal. He doesn't rush. His fingers slip beneath the front cover, as if turning a page is its own deliberate act of care. The leather bends quietly, and the paper reveals itself slowly, carrying faint marks of ink in handwriting that flows in smooth, thoughtful lines. This room, he begins, wasn't always so quiet. He looks into the fire as he speaks, letting the dancing light reflect against his features. Long ago, he continues, it was a gathering place for voices, some filled with laughter, some filled with stories, some filled with thoughts spoken, simply to see how they sounded out loud. But with time, people grew busier, nights grew shorter, the world outside moved faster, and slowly, the room learned how to hold quiet instead of conversation. He pauses, as though letting the words settle in the air. But quiet, I discovered, has its own kind of story. You notice the way he frames silence, not as emptiness, but as something meaningful, something nurturing. The crackling fire and the steady clock seem to nod in agreement, offering tiny sounds that fill the stillness without disturbing it. He turns another page. Across the room, a shelf holds objects that hint at lives lived long before tonight. A small, delicate music box rests beneath a stack of notebooks. A glass jar holds smooth river stones, each marked with faint carvings. A folded scarf sits atop a stack of letters, the fabric faded but lovingly kept. Everything here seems to have been collected with intention. The storyteller clears his throat gently, not to draw attention, but to steady his voice. This fireplace, he says, glancing at the hearth, has listened to more hearts than I could ever count. Each flame that's burned here has carried someone's hopes, someone's memories, someone's need for rest. He leans slightly forward, and on nights like this, when the world grows quiet enough, the stories left behind in that warmth seem to whisper back. He doesn't mean whispering in a magical, haunting sense. There is nothing eerie about the way he says it. Instead, he speaks as though warmth itself holds memory, as though comfort remembers who has felt it and continues offering itself in layers. The fire shifts gently. A log settles, releasing a slow crack, followed by the soft sighing sound of expanding heat. The flames draw closer together, then rise again, painting the stones of the hearth with moving patterns of light. Sometimes, he goes on, people carry their thoughts like bundled firewood, heavy, stacked high, pressed against their arms. They believe they must hold everything themselves, all at once, because there is never enough time to set anything down. He glances toward you knowingly. But here, there is no hurry. Here, you can set a few of those bundles beside the fire. Let them rest for a while. You do not need to burn everything tonight. You don't need to solve every thought. You simply need to breathe. The suggestion feels like an exhale you didn't realize you were waiting for. Perhaps you imagine those bundles, pieces of unfinished plans, lingering worries, conversations replayed quietly inside your head, and you set them gently near the hearth. Not gone, not forgotten, simply placed somewhere warm and safe, where they don't have to be carried. Good. The storyteller murmurs softly, as if sensing your shift in posture, the way your shoulders relax just a little more. The night is long enough for rest. He returns to the journal and traces a line of ink with his fingertip. This entry is one of my favorites, he says quietly. It begins with a simple sentence. The room was ready for another story. He smiles at the memory, then settles back into his chair, letting the blanket fall comfortably across his lap. That sentence was written many winters ago, he explains, on a night much like this one. There was snow outside then, gathering in soft piles on the windowsill. The world had turned quieter than usual, heavy with peace. And I remember feeling something gentle, as if the room itself had taken a long, thoughtful breath. His words move in slow, deliberate rhythms, more like waves brushing sand than any dramatic narration. You can almost picture the earlier version of this same rooms. Snowflakes drifting through a soft night sky, the same fire glowing, perhaps younger, perhaps brighter, yet offering the same tender warmth. The furniture sitting in slightly different positions, the rug newer, its colors still vibrant. Someone else sitting where you sit now, perhaps wary, perhaps thoughtful, perhaps simply in need of stillness. The storyteller's voice guides you gently into this imagined memory, while still keeping you anchored in the present moment. Nothing about his words demands effort. They allow your mind to wander peacefully, like watching clouds shift across lingering daylight. And I realized, he continues, that even when stories go untold for a while, rooms remember how to hold them. He closes the journal softly, not because the memory is finished, but because this part of the memory has done its work. The cover rests gently beneath his hand again, offering quiet assurance. Then he looks to you with a kind of calm sincerity. Tonight, he says, this room is ready again. Not for excitement, not for noise, simply for the slow comfort of letting thoughts unwind. We will go through the hours gently, one breath, one page, one warm flicker of light at a time. You find yourself leaning back a little further into your chair. Your hands rest loosely. Your breathing deepens just a touch. The rhythm of the clock feels synchronized with your heartbeat. The fire keeps its steady glow, drawing your gaze into its shifting shapes. Outside, the night grows slightly darker, not in a threatening way, but in a way that encourages deeper rest. The world beyond the windows is peaceful, muted, distant. Inside, the sense of safety grows thicker, layered with time and warmth. Part 1 continues to unfold slowly, but its essence is already forming. A room made for quiet, a storyteller who understands tired minds, a fireplace that whispers not with mystery, but with comfort. And you, simply sitting, listening, breathing, are part of it. The storyteller adjusts the journal once more and speaks softly, almost to himself. Let the night take its time. Then, with a peaceful patience, he prepares to share the next layer of the journey, a story that doesn't rush, that doesn't insist, that simply accompanies you deeper into calm. Night settles more completely around the cottage, as if the world outside has wrapped itself in layers of quiet wool and snow, soft hush. The wind no longer presses at the windows the way it did earlier. Now, its size drifts and disappears somewhere in the distant dark hills. Inside the fireplace room, The flames move with patient grace, slower, steadier, calmer, as though they have learned the listener's breath and now mirror it back, ember by ember. The storyteller, still seated in the comfortable creased armchair, adjusts slightly, not in a hurry, not to perform, but simply the way one settles deeper into softness. The old cushions accept the movement kindly. They seem to remember every person who has ever rested here. It feels like a room made of memory and safety and warmth. The storyteller glances toward the logs, then toward you, not to measure time, but to honor the quiet. His voice, when it arrives, seems to lift from the deep fibers of the room itself. Fireplaces, he says gently. No more stories than any single person ever could. He does not say it as though he is teaching a lesson. He says it the way someone might speak about the weather or a childhood path, easy, lightly, without weight. The crackle agrees softly. He continues. They remember footsteps, conversations whispered late into the night, the way people lean closer when they feel safe, the way they breathe differently when they finally begin to rest. The room seems to exhale with him. You notice the smallest things. The bronze kettle warming quietly on the side table. The faint, soothing scent of cinnamon and toasted apple peel. The way lamplight rests across the bookshelf, like pale gold sheets folded neatly over rows of sleeping stories. Nothing here needs to hurry. Nothing here needs to prove anything. It is enough simply to sit, to breathe, to let the gentle warmth work its way slowly into places that have felt cold from too much thinking. The storyteller's hand lifts, passing through the glow of the flames, stopping at the safest distance. He is not performing, he is remembering. This room belonged to my grandmother, he says softly, and then before her to someone else, and before them someone else again. All of them kept this fire. All of them sat here on nights that felt a little too heavy, or a little too quiet, or simply too full. His eyes soften, not with sadness, but with appreciation. She said the fire didn't burn wood only. It burned worry. It burned racing thoughts. It burned the pieces of the day that felt jagged and unfinished, and it turned them into something gentle, something warm, something that floated away in tiny sparks. You watch another spark drift upward. It rises, pauses, fades. The room hums with a natural lull, not silence exactly, but layered calm. The kinds of sounds you don't normally notice unless you slow down enough to let them meet you. The whisper of fabric against the chair, a quiet pop in the timber beam overhead, the faint ticking of a clock not keeping perfect time, content instead to move slowly, intentionally. A cup is lifted, tea stirs. No rush. The storyteller takes a slow sip and sets the cup down again. He looks at the old clock hanging near the mantel, not as one might look to schedule, but as one might look at an old friend. People used to gather here, he muses, voice softer now, not to fix anything, not to decide things. They simply came because the room accepted them. They came because they were tired of holding everything up by themselves. You feel something in those words, something gentle and familiar. The idea of a place that asks nothing from you except to rest. The storyteller leans his elbows lightly on the chair arms and resumes quietly. One winter, when I was young, someone came to the cottage on a night not unlike this one. Snow had gathered so deeply that the paths were erased. The world beyond the hills felt far away, unreachable. They knocked softly, as though unsure whether anyone could hear them through the thick blanket of night. He pauses, not to add drama, simply to allow the room to breathe again. I remember my grandmother opening the door. She never asked why they had come. She only said, "You look cold. Come sit by the fire." He smiles gently at the memory, and they did, and that was enough. You picture it easily, because the scene does not feel like a story. It feels like something that still lives inside the room, a warmth preserved. The fire sways, reflecting sleepy amber light across the storyteller's face, across the wood grain floor, across the quiet spaces where shadows rest peacefully. You can feel your shoulders soften another small degree. Another layer of thinking loosens its hold. The storyteller continues, voice slow and rhythmic. Most nights, people didn't even speak. They sat here, breathed quietly, listened to the crackling. Sometimes they would write a few lines in a small notebook. Sometimes they would simply close their eyes. He tilts his head slightly, acknowledging the present moment. Just like this. The room holds the quiet like a blanket. Outside, snow drifts lazily past the window pane, drifting sideways, then upward, then settling down again, each flake taking its time. The walls of the cottage retain warmth, like an embrace. The fire softens further, settling into long glowing bars of orange and rose, gold lined with little rivers of shimmering heat. The storyteller finally moves, just enough to reach for an old leather bound book resting on the small table to his right. The spine is worn smooth by decades of turning. He doesn't open it yet. This, he says kindly, is the Fireplace journal. Every hearthkeeper wrote in it. Not about worries themselves, not directly. They wrote about moments, small ones, quiet ones, things they were grateful for, but too tired to notice in the rush of the day. He places it gently on his lap. There are no rules, no expectations. Sometimes a page only says, "The apples smelled sweet tonight." Sometimes it says, "We laughed quietly for a while." Sometimes it says nothing but the date. He traces the cover lightly. It taught me something. Peace doesn't always arrive as a solution. Sometimes it comes as softness, as something familiar, as a safe place to set your thoughts down for a while, knowing you can pick them back up later if you still want them. The fire nods again with a quiet hiss. You begin to notice how the entire rhythm of the scene has slowed. Every movement, every word, every breath. As though the cottage itself wants the night to last long enough for the mind to finally unclench. The storyteller finally opens the book. The pages whisper. He doesn't read aloud right away. He allows the simple act of turning the pages to become part of the comfort. A soft, repetitive motion, paper sliding at an unhurried pace. Then, almost like a breeze through long grass, his voice comes back. "This page is from a night like tonight," he murmurs. He reads a small entry, only a few lines. The room felt warmer than usual. Perhaps not the fire, perhaps the company. Someone sighed, and you could hear the relief in it. The snow made its own quiet map across the world. We let it. He closes the book lightly. "Not everything needs analysis," he says. "Some things simply need safe light." The statement lands gently, not as instruction, but as permission. A subtle reassurance that here, in this room, nothing must be solved before sleep can come. You notice how your breathing has fallen into rhythm with the flames, low, calm, steady. Thoughts drift through like snowflakes, visible for a moment, landing on soft ground, then dissolving harmlessly. The storyteller leans back again. The chair creaks the way old wood does when it is content. "You may not realize it," he says softly, "but rooms like this still exist in different shapes, in different corners of the world. Sometimes they are real places. Sometimes they are spaces inside you, places made of memory and hope and quiet. Places you can return to when the day weighs too heavily." His tone becomes even softer, almost like a blanket spreading light over tired shoulders. And tonight, this fireplace room can be one of those places for you. The flames lower once more, becoming almost meditative, like a slow heartbeat stitched into gentle light. Minutes pass, not measured in numbers, but in sensation. Warmth, calm, quiet companionship. A tiny log breaks softly, falling into a new glowing arrangement. The storyteller watches fondly, as though the fire were a friend settling under a thicker quilt. He folds the journal closed again, not abruptly, carefully, respectfully. He places it back on the table. "We'll read more later," he says with a promise that feels soft rather than binding. "For now, it's enough to sit, to let the room hold you, to let the fire think for you a while." He closes his eyes for a moment. You do not feel pressure to do the same. but the invitation is there if it feels right. The fire whispers quietly. The kettle sighs on the warmer. Outside, the snow deepens the world into a deeper hush. Inside, there is only warmth, safe light, and the steady reassurance that night does not need to be wrestled with, only accompanied. The storyteller opens his eyes again and smiles gently. Part of caring for a fireplace, he says, is knowing when to simply watch it. And so, for a stretch of night that might be a minute or might be much longer, the story allows space where nothing happens except breathing and the slow choreography of embers. The mind loosens one more small knot. The body rests a little more deeply, and the fireplace keeps its steady, quiet vigil, not asking, not expecting, simply glowing in the calm center of the room, like a gentle guardian of sleep. Morning does not rush into the cottage. It arrives the way mist drifts across a quiet meadow, gradually, carefully, respecting the delicate hush of the night that came before. Pale light brushes the frosted window panes, soft and silver, blue, like watercolor washed gently across glass. But the fireplace room remains mostly dim, the fire still alive, still glowing low and steady in the hearth. It has moved into its morning state, not roaring, not sleeping, just breathing quietly, as if it too understands the value of slow beginnings. The storyteller is already awake, not hurried, not bustling, simply awake in the way old houses are awake, present, listening, patient. He sits near the fire once more, but this time he holds a small metal poker, gently nudging the embers, coaxing pockets of heat into new patterns. Ash lifts softly and then settles again, never chaotic, only drifting like sleepy snowflakes inside the hearth. When the fire grows low, he says softly, noticing you stir, people think it has less to give. But sometimes the calmest coals are the warmest. He smiles, a kind, familiar expression. Just like people. The cottage smells faintly of warm bread and cedar. Somewhere in another room, floorboards murmur under the slow movements of the house. The world outside remains quiet, the snow muffling even the smallest sound of morning birds. The storyteller turns one small log. It doesn't crack sharply. Instead, it sighs, settling deeper into the embrace of heat. He rests the poker aside. There's something about dawn in this room, he whispers, almost to himself. It invites remembering, not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals little by little. He gestures gently toward the hearth. Look closely. Every piece of ash holds the outline of what once was, but it is softer now, gentle, no edges left to scrape against. You look, and indeed, the ashes seem to form shapes, lost twigs, tiny arcs, delicate impressions like pale feathers. Nothing precise, but everything easily accepted by the imagination. This, He continues, is where I learned that time softens things. Worries burn hot when they're new, but if you place them somewhere safe, somewhere warm, they cool into memory, something you can hold without being hurt. He lets the words drift out and fade. No analysis, no pressure, just steady acceptance. He rises slowly, each movement thoughtful, and crosses the room to one of the shelves. His hand glides across the spines of numerous books, journals, and notebooks. He selects another, cloth-bound, deep green, corners slightly frayed. This one, he says, returning to his chair, belonged to the visitor I told you about, the one who came through the snow and sat quietly with my grandmother by this very fire. They stayed a while, long enough to rest, long enough to feel safe. He opens to a page near the center, ink slightly faded, handwriting patient and slow. He reads, "Tonight I realize something simple. I do not have to think my way out of every feeling. Some of them just want to be warmed, the way cold hands simply want a fire to hold them." The storyteller closes the journal softly. They left this behind on purpose. He explains, said the room had given them something, and they wanted to give something back. Not advice, not instruction, just a small truth someone else might find when they needed it. He sets the book aside gently. You see, this room doesn't carry stories like burdens. It carries them like blankets. The fire nods quietly, with another mellow shift of light. You can feel something inside you loosening, like snow melting at the edge of a roof. Not gone, not forced away, simply softening. The storyteller notices, not with commentary, only with a kinder voice when he speaks again. Do you want to know why I stayed here? He doesn't wait for answer. He continues softly, as if sharing a secret with the gentle light. I was supposed to leave, travel far, see large cities, make my life somewhere busier. But every time I stood at the doorway with my packed bag, the fireplace would glow a little brighter, and I would think about all the souls who had sat here, letting their thoughts settle, finding rest for the first time in months. He looks thoughtfully into the coals, and I realized keeping a place like this alive is not small work. It may be quiet work, but it is not small. His words feel like they land gently inside the chest, not heavy, but grounding, as though they remind the heart that gentleness is not weakness, and stillness is not emptiness. It is care. He rises again, stepping carefully across the room, and opens a small wooden cabinet. Inside, tiny tins of herbs, carefully labeled lavender, chamomile, lemon balm, a small glass jar of wild honey the color of summer. He prepares tea once more, not mechanically, but with peaceful intention. Every sound becomes part of the room's soft orchestra, the spoon tapping lightly, water pouring like a distant stream, the faint rustle of herbs releasing their fragrance. He speaks as he works. My grandmother used to say, a story is not there to change your life overnight. It is there to sit beside you while change finds its own timing. He hands you the warm cup, steady, safe, familiar. You cradle it, feeling its heat travel into your palms, spreading slowly into your wrists, relaxing your fingers. Stories near a fireplace. He adds, don't demand anything from you. They simply glow next to you until your thoughts remember how to breathe. He returns to his chair and rests again. The flames shift subtly into taller shapes, not urgent, just new forms leaning softly upward. He looks toward the window, where the sky has brightened to a pale silver. Outside, trees stand like quiet companions, branches holding snow that glitters faintly in the tentative daylight. There used to be children who visited, he says fondly. They believed the ashes contained secret constellations. They would sit on the rug and trace little pathways in the cool gray powder, pretending they were walking gently across the night sky. He chuckles lightly, a sound almost as soft as the crackle. They were always careful, always quiet, as though they instinctively knew this wasn't a place for loudness. He pauses, remembering. One evening, one of them wrote in the journal, just a few words. He opens another page, smiles. The fire is like a friendly animal that never leaves. His smile deepens. Simple thoughts can be the truest, he says. The fire responds with a cozy glow. You feel that warmth travel slowly through your body, shoulders softening, jaw unclenching, breath dropping gently lower into the belly. The thoughts that once arrived in noisy clusters now drift in smaller handfuls, then single wisps, then not at all. Silence fills the room, not empty silence, but supported silence. The storyteller senses it, and he honors it, letting the quiet last. He doesn't fill the space with explanations. He lets peace speak for itself. Eventually, he speaks again, voice nearly blending with the soft hum of the hearth. This house has weathered many winters, some harsh, some lonely, some beautifully peaceful. Through them all, the fireplace stayed. Not because fire is powerful, but because warmth is patient. He looks toward you with gentle sincerity. And you deserve patient warmth. He lets the words rest there like a blanket laid carefully across the shoulders of the night. You glance at the mantel. On it sits a little wooden carving, a small house with a tiny chimney shaped by hand. Imperfect in the way only lovingly crafted objects can be. He notices, my grandfather whittled that, said it reminded him that inside every home there should be a place where the heart can quietly unclasp. He leans back. You don't have to know everything tonight. You don't have to decide anything. You don't have to solve the thoughts that feel tangled. He nods toward the fire. Just let them sit here a while. Let the flames sort through what matters and what doesn't. They're very good at that. And you believe him, not because he insists, but because the room itself proves it true. Because the longer you sit, the more the mind loosens its grip on questions that do not need answers tonight. The fire lowers again, settling into rich amber hues. The day outside moves forward quietly, but time inside the fireplace room stretches like a soft blanket, not pressing, not demanding, simply existing. The storyteller closes his eyes for a brief moment, not asleep, just resting. When I'm gone someday, he says gently, someone else will sit in this chair. Someone else will warm tea. Someone else will turn the logs and listen and keep the quiet alive. He opens his eyes again, calm, steady. That is the way of hearth keepers. We do not keep the fire for ourselves. We keep it so that weary travelers, even travelers of the mind, can find a gentle place to set their thoughts down. Another spark drifts upward. Another sigh of heat. Another subtle softening of everything inside you. He reaches once more for the green journal and adds a new line, not reading it aloud, simply writing something small and sincere. Then he places it back on the table and breathes deeply, slowly, evenly. The room echoes his rhythm. The fire breathes, the cottage listens, and in the quiet, in the soft hush where warmth meets rest, you feel both grounded and free, as though the world has stopped spinning just long enough for you to catch up with yourself in the gentlest possible way. The storyteller smiles. There, he says quietly, the fire has remembered you now. And once a fire remembers someone, there will always be a place for them at the hearth. He leans back, allowing the scene to fade into deeper calm, making space for an even softer chapter to come. Evening returns differently than morning. Where dawn arrives shyly, evening arrives like an old friend, unhurried, quietly confident, knowing exactly where to sit and how to make itself comfortable. The sky beyond the windows deepens into velvety blue, then into a calm, endless night, not heavy, not intimidating, simply wide and patient. The world outside slows again, as though the snow has tucked everything into soft blankets. Inside the fireplace room, the warmth remains steady. The storyteller has added a fresh log, not large, not crackling with drama, just the right piece of firewood that catches slowly, glowing from the inside out. The flames rise gently, wrapping themselves around it, as though greeting a familiar guest. You sit where you have always been meant to sit, close, but not too close, letting the heat travel toward you in small, soothing waves. The The storyteller speaks only when the fire has already said most of what needs saying. Nighttime, he murmurs, is not a test to pass. It is an invitation to trust that the world can take care of itself for a while without us. He lets the thought drift peacefully upward, the way sparks lift, then vanish into the dark chimney throat. He doesn't rush to fill the silence. Silence is allowed here. He leans forward slightly, his hands relaxed around a mug of tea, the steam curling slowly in the gentle glow. There was a traveler once, he says after a while, who always arrived with maps. Maps of cities, maps of choices, maps of worries. They believed they had to chart everything, every future possibility, before they could rest. He smiles faintly, but the fire does not demand plans. It does not ask you where you are going or who you will be. It simply warms whoever sits near it. He gestures toward the hearth, and after a few nights here, that traveler began to fold their maps, one by one, until they realized they didn't need them for sleep. They only needed permission to stop thinking for a little while. Outside, wind brushes softly against the cottage walls. Not fierce, not rattling, just a low, gentle conversation between air and wood. The roof creaks now and then, the sounds blending seamlessly into the safe lullaby of this old place. The storyteller opens yet another journal, this one thin, with a ribbon tucked between the pages. He reads, "There is a quiet only fire can teach. The quiet that happens not when thoughts disappear, but when they no longer feel urgent." He closes the book gently. "That's one of my favorites," he says, "because it reminds me that minds like ours, minds that care deeply, don't need to be fixed. They only need somewhere kind to rest." He leans back, letting his shoulders relax, modeling the very ease he describes. The fire dances with a soft, amber rhythm. You notice the rug beneath your feet, thick, woolen, hand-woven, the kind of rug that carries stories in every thread. The colors, though muted with age, blend beautifully: earthy browns, warm rust, reds, faded golds. It feels like standing on a memory that has learned how to be gentle. On the table rests a small wooden clock, quiet except for the softest, roundest tick. You can hear it only when you choose to, and even then, it feels more like a heartbeat than a reminder of time passing. The storyteller follows your gaze. "That clock belonged to a sailor," he explains softly. "He said it helped him remember that even when the sea was loud, there was always something steady beneath the waves. He left it here when he retired inland, said the fireplace felt like an anchor." He chuckles lightly, just a breath of sound. People think they must leave great treasures behind to be remembered, but sometimes the greatest gift is simply something that helps others feel calm. He shifts the log slightly. No crack, no snap, only a deeper glow spreading through the embered wood. The room brightens just enough to paint the shelves in soft golden hues. The storyteller grows quieter, not distant, simply reflective. And when he eventually speaks again, his voice is like a calm stream flowing in darkness. My grandmother used to write letters to the night, he says. Not prayers, not wishes, just gentle acknowledgements. She would sit here, ink her pen, and whisper onto paper, "Thank you for carrying what I no longer need to think about." He smiles at the memory. She believed night had a way of sorting thoughts, the way the tide sorts shells along a beach, leaving only what belongs with you and taking the rest softly away. You imagine it, thoughts drifting out into the starry sky, dissolving into something kind and infinite. The fire shifts quietly, its light flickering against the stone of the fireplace. Shadows breathe along the walls, long and soft, trailing into corners that feel neither dark nor hidden, simply restful. The storyteller glances toward the mantel again. "There's a tradition here," he says gently. When guests feel a weight lift, even just a little, they write a single sentence and tuck it somewhere into the room. Not to be read immediately, not to be praised, just to add to the quiet chorus of voices who discovered they didn't have to hold everything alone. He lifts the edge of the carved box on the shelf and shows you briefly, not intrusively, slips of folded paper, each one carrying something small and tender. He closes the lid respectfully. "I don't read them until long after people leave," he says. "And when I do, they always sound the same beneath different words. I remembered how to slow down." The phrase hangs beautifully in the air, as though even the room nods in agreement. You feel an immense softness rise in your chest, not emotional intensity, but calm recognition. You too have slowed, without trying, without forcing. The mind that once raced has begun to walk, and now it simply sits. The storyteller watches the fire for a long time. "When I grew older," he says quietly, "I sometimes wondered whether the world had outgrown places like this. Faster lives, brighter screens, louder spaces. But then more people found their way to this door, not always in person, sometimes only in spirit, and I realized something." He looks at the flames again. "There will always be a part of every person that longs for a warm room, a quiet story, and a night that asks nothing of them." He rests one hand calmly on the armrest. "That longing is not weakness, it is wisdom." The room deepens into a warm twilight of its own, the hearth glowing more than illuminating, the edges of the room fading into velvety comfort. The tea grows slightly sweeter as it cools. The fire whispers softly, like pages turning somewhere inside the walls. The storyteller stands slowly, stretching gently, not breaking the quiet, and walks to the small window. He peers out for a moment, then turns back with a peaceful nod. The snow has softened the world again, he says. It lays across the fields like a hush. Nights like this are meant for resting hearts. He returns, sits again, and this time he does nothing but breathe with the room. A steady, rhythmic companionship that feels like being guided into stillness without effort. He eventually speaks once more. The words softer now, slower, almost a lullaby themselves. Everything you brought with you, every worry, every question, every looping thought, you don't have to carry them all into the night. Place them beside the fire. Let them warm. Let them change shape. Let them become lighter. He inhales gently. And tomorrow, if they still matter, they'll be here, easier to hold. The fire nods, truly nods, in another soft shift of ember light. The storyteller's eyes close a little, not quite sleep, but close to it. That peaceful threshold where the world loosens and trust takes over. He speaks one last thing for the evening, barely more than a whisper. This room will remember you kindly. He doesn't need to say more. The night does the rest. The clock ticks like a quiet heart. The rug holds your feet. The notebooks keep their gentle secrets. The fire burns low but steady, promising warmth without effort. And you realize somewhere deep and wordless that you have crossed from the thinking part of the night into the resting part. Nothing pulls. Nothing demands. Everything simply supports the soft drift towards sleep. The storyteller remains nearby, not watching, not guarding, simply sharing space with your rest, as hearthkeepers have always done. Outside, stars gather above the snowy world. Inside, warmth gathers inside your breathing. The story doesn't end here. It settles here, and the night holds you quietly, as though it knows exactly what to do. The night had settled into its softest hour, the kind of hour that feels almost weightless, as if time itself had decided to rest for a while. Outside the cottage, the world rested beneath a hush of starlight, the sky a deep velvet tapestry, dusted with silver. Inside the old storyteller's fireplace room, the fire had grown quieter, the flames lower, the embers glowing like tiny constellations resting in the hearth. Each gentle crackle was like a sigh, a soft reminder that warmth would carry through until morning. You sat back in the comfortable chair, wrapped in a blanket that felt almost cloud-like, the fabric warm against your skin. The cushions beneath you seemed softer than before, not because they had changed, but because your body had finally surrendered its last pieces of tension. Across from you, the old storyteller rested in his rocking chair, swaying slowly with the rhythm of the firelight. The soft creak of wood blended with the whispering flames, creating a lullaby made not of music, but of presence, of company, of a safe quiet that asked nothing of you. He glanced at the window, where the faint outline of moonlight shaped the frame, and then back to you with a gentle smile. This part of the night, he said softly, is where thoughts finally grow tired of wandering. His words didn't feel like instructions. They floated more like gentle observations, drifting through the room like feathers. You could feel your thoughts slowing, as though each idea had become a leaf settling onto a calm pond. Nothing urgent, nothing demanding, just stillness. The storyteller leaned slightly forward, not to fill the silence, but to sit with it in kindness. The fireplace, he continued quietly, has a way of remembering what the world forgets. It knows the rhythm of rest. It knows when to soften the light, when to lower its voice, when to simply glow instead of burn. You watched as one ember pulsed softly, fading, then brightening again, as if breathing. Another drifted to the side, settling gently, becoming part of the quiet landscape of warmth. Your body mirrored that rhythm. Inhale, exhale, slower now, smoother, easier. A wave of comfort moved through your shoulders, down along your arms, settling into your hands. The blanket felt heavier in a soothing way, like a reassuring hand across your back, reminding you that it was all right to let go even further. The storyteller rested his palms on the worn wood of his chair arms. Every story, he said, has a way of knowing when it is time to whisper. He wasn't speaking about the story alone. He was speaking about the mind, about the heart, about the parts of you that had carried so much today. The worries that once felt sharp now seemed far away, softened into shapes without edges. You could feel the room dimming ever so slightly, shadows blending calmly with the amber glow. Nothing disappeared. It simply grew gentler, quieter, easier to rest inside. A log shifted in the hearth, rearranging itself, then settled again. The sound was deeply reassuring, a natural movement, not a disturbance. The kind of sound the night understands perfectly. The storyteller's voice came again, slow and unhurried. There is a comfort, he said, in knowing that you do not need to hold everything at once. The world is large enough to hold things for you, dreams, thoughts, hopes, until you are ready to pick them up again. Your breath joined the room, one long, easy inhale, then a soft release. Outside, the branches of the nearby trees moved gently in the faintest breeze, creating delicate shapes on the curtain. The shadow pattern shifted slowly like water, like the drift of clouds across the sky. Inside, the warmth wrapped itself around you, deeper than before. You could feel it gather around your chest, your ribs, your back. A calm heaviness spread through your legs, all the way down to your feet, as though they had decided to root themselves comfortably where they were. The storyteller reached toward a small table beside him and lifted an old book, not with any urgency, but with the familiar tenderness of someone who had opened this book thousands of times. He didn't read from it. He simply placed it on his lap and rested his hands atop the cover. Stories, he said softly, do not really end. They simply grow quieter until another night invites them to speak again. That feeling of continuation without pressure settled gently into your mind. Nothing needed closure, nothing needed fixing. Everything could simply rest. A delicate ribbon of smoke curled upward from the hearth, twirling lazily into the chimney's dark mouth. The embers glowed softer still, now more gold than flame, like memories that would stay warm even after sleep claimed the room. Your eyelids felt heavy, not forced, just naturally weighted by calm. Each blink lasted a little longer. Each breath lingered a little deeper. The storyteller noticed, and his smile warmed. This room, he whispered, has welcomed many travelers of thought. It knows the language of tired minds. It whispers not to the noise in your head, but to the quiet beneath it. He spoke of a quiet that had always belonged to you, the quiet that remains when the world fades into gentle distance, the quiet that exists just before sleep, soft, patient, and endlessly kind. He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly, rocking with a rhythm that soothed like ocean waves back and forth, back and forth. The fire echoed that rhythm. The air echoed that rhythm. Even your heartbeat began following it. Slow, calm, unhurried. Across the walls, faint reflections shimmered. They moved like dream fragments, vague shapes that meant nothing specific, yet felt unbelievably peaceful. Your mind wandered among them without effort, drifting gently from image to image the way a leaf drifts across a still lake. The storyteller's voice dropped softer, as though speaking to the space between waking and dreaming. You are safe here, he said. Your thoughts may rest. Your heart may loosen. The night will keep watch. He spoke not from authority, but from companionship, the reassurance of someone who had sat by many fires, guiding many minds into peaceful sleep. A warm silence filled the room again, richer now, deeper, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of stillness, full of permission to drift. The old clock on the mantel ticked softly, each second a gentle footstep moving into the night. Even time seemed quieter here, polite, respectful, unwilling to intrude. The storyteller closed his eyes briefly, breathing in the scent of wood smoke, then exhaling slowly. When he opened them again, his gaze held a quiet gratitude. "There is nothing left you need to do," he murmured. "The night will carry the rest." You felt that truth settle into you, dissolving the last fragments of alertness. Your thoughts no longer lined up to be examined. They simply floated farther away, blending softly into a comfortable blur. Your body sank just a little deeper into the chair, as if the fabric remembered exactly how to cradle someone drifting off. The blanket curved naturally around you, cocoon-like, sealing in warmth, sealing in calm. Another ember dimmed, and another, and another. Each one a small signal to your mind that the world was gently lowering its lights. The storyteller looked once more into the hearth, nodding slightly as though acknowledging an old friend. "The fire knows when it is time to rest," he said softly. "And so do you." Beyond the cottage, the stars seemed to glow more steadily, not bright, not demanding, simply present. The night sky wrapped the world with the same quiet gentleness the blanket wrapped you. The storyteller's voice, now barely more than a whisper, drifted like smoke through the air. "Let your thoughts settle like snowflakes on quiet ground, untouched, undisturbed, beautifully still." Your breath followed the image, slow, delicate, floating down, then resting. The room faded into deeper softness, lines blurred, shapes softened. The edges of the world melted into sleep-colored haze. You felt yourself gently drifting, not falling, not dropping, drifting. The way a feather settles slowly through the air until it finds the perfect resting place. The storyteller's eyes grew softer too, filled with the tender patience of someone who knew the moment was arriving, the moment where story becomes dream. "May your night be kind," he whispered. "May your rest be deep. May your dreams walk softly." The last embers glowed in a tender cluster, breathing out one final warmth. The rocking chair slowed, the room hushed, and the world, for this quiet stretch of night, felt entirely at peace. You allowed your mind to loosen completely, now unburdened, safe, steady, drifting gently past the edge of story and into the wide, welcoming fields of sleep, where the fire's glow follows you as a memory of warmth, where the storyteller's kindness lingers like a soft echo, where the night holds you gently and everything becomes wonderfully, beautifully quiet. The room has grown so still now, so peaceful, so deeply wrapped in the hush of night. The storyteller's voice has faded into memory, like the last glow of embers beneath the hearth. The story has done what it came to do. It softened the edges of the day, eased the weight in your thoughts, and guided your mind into a quieter place. And now there is nothing left to follow, nothing left to solve, nothing left to think through. only rest. Imagine the warmth from the fireplace lingering softly around you, not bright, not vivid, just a gentle presence, like the echo of comfort that stays long after a hug. It surrounds you, steady and patient, asking nothing of you at all. Your breath drifts in and out, slowly, naturally, effortlessly. Each breath invites your body to settle further. Your shoulders loosen, your jaw softens. Even the tiny muscles around your eyes begin to let go. You don't have to try. The night is already doing the work for you. Thoughts may still float by from time to time, and that's all right. Let them pass like distant clouds in a wide, open sky. They don't need your attention. They don't need answers. They simply drift and dissolve and disappear into quiet. You are safe here. You are warm here. You are allowed to rest. The world beyond the room can wait. Every task, every question, every plan belongs to another time, a time when you are refreshed, calm, and renewed. For this moment, your only purpose is to sleep deeply, peacefully, completely. Feel the gentle weight of the night settling around you, like a soft blanket drawn up over the edges of your mind. It seals in tranquility. It keeps the world at a kind distance. It reminds your body that it is finally okay to release every last bit of tension. If your mind wanders, let it wander into softness, into quiet fields, slow streams, wide skies, places where nothing rushes, where nothing pushes, where time itself moves in long, easy breaths. The storyteller's fireplace grows dimmer in memory now, the rocking chair still, the cottage resting beneath the stars. The story remains somewhere peaceful, not gone, simply sleeping too. And as it sleeps, you drift with it, downward, deeper, quieter. The night holds you gently, the way calm water holds a drifting leaf. You don't have to stay awake to listen anymore. You don't have to follow a single word. Everything that matters is already here. Warmth, safety, rest. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts soften into dreamlike shapes and float away. You are cared for. You are safe. You can sleep now. And as you sink further into the softness of the night, may your dreams be gentle. May your rest be deep. And may the quiet you found here stay with you, like a slow, glowing ember, long after sleep has fully wrapped you in its embrace. Good night, sleep deeply.